Welcome to the World Philosophy and Religion podcast with Dr. Marc Gafni. Today's episode is all about the dignity of desire. Why the root cause of humanity's greatest crises today is a false understanding of what desire really is. So Dr. Marc Gafni is going to be talking about 5 major points throughout this episode. The first is the 2 bankrupt answers that we currently have to the most important question of life. Second, we're going to be talking about why the crisis in Iran is really at its core a crisis of desire. Third, Dr. Marc Gafni will be speaking about how desire is a first principle and first value of cosmos, meaning that desire is not an accident, and he's going to be talking about what that means for your personal life. Fourth, we will be talking about the 3 questions that guide everything about every individual's life and how you can up-level your answers to those questions when you become more aware of them. And lastly, we're going to be talking about what the protesters in Iran and protesters all around the globe who are protesting for a good, true, and beautiful future for humanity know inside of their bodies, but they can't quite articulate it yet. And Dr. Marc Gafni is going to be helping you and I to articulate that properly. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this amazing episode with Dr. Marc Gafni.
And let me just say a couple of things. It's a very, very important conversation now. And it's such a pivoting moment in the world that you almost don't know what to say. So let me just say even before we step in, the meta. We are going to, and we've been threatening to do this for, the last 8-9 months. We meaning the leadership team who are really responsible for guiding One Mountain and trying to understand, and stay with me, okay? I just want to try and get this clearly. In order to actually do what we need to do in One Mountain, we're trying to do, and I want to go into a very big conversation this week in a new way and try and break some enormously important, and to say it's exciting would be to major an understatement, but just kind of a vital piece of new ground, okay? Before then, why do we do One Mountain? Why does One Mountain exist? So we know there's a piece that's called Love or Die, which I'm sure has been in the chat box already. Essentially what we say is that we're at this moment of meta-crisis and meta-opportunity, that we're poised between utopia and dystopia. And at this moment in which we're poised between utopia and dystopia, in what we've called, Zach and myself, we've called a time between stories or a time between worlds. And that phrase has spread through many, many spaces. This characterization, we're at a time between stories, we're at a time between worlds. A time in between worlds, between stories. In this time in between, everything depends on our capacity to generate a new source from which we grow reality. I mean, a new source code, if you will, from which we live. Because we all live from within a story. We all live from within an implicit set of assumptions about the nature of reality. And we all live from within very clear, although often unconscious, answers to what we call the 3 great questions of CosmoErotic humanism. And the questions are where am I? Who am I? And what ought, O-U-G-H-T, what ought I be doing? Those are the 3 great questions of CosmoErotic humanism. And notice that we don't have why. Why is a metaphysical, theological question, right? The why needs to be put aside, because that's a claim that we can't validate. We can validate who am I, where am I, and what ought I do. And the why emerges from that. We don't want to get lost in the why. It's where am I, who am I, what ought I do. Now, everything that we do, all of capitalism, on the one hand, all of communism, which still reigns in China, no longer in Russia, but the whole world of communism that yielded so much of reality is based on three distinct answers to these questions. And the world of capitalism, the Western world, which has adopted capitalism, and the world of democracy is based on three other answers to these questions. And every religion in general, but every specific religion, answers these questions differently. And the assumption is that the answers to these questions, the assumption that kind of reigns in the world today, there are two assumptions. One assumption is the answers to these questions are made up. You actually can't answer these questions, they're made up. There's actually no real answer, because there's no real answer that's significant, at least in terms of what ought I do. In terms of what ought I do, no real significance. Doesn't really matter. Because one huge part of the world answers the first two questions as being social construction. What the heck did that mean? Meaning the postmodern response that rules in the world is, where am I? Nowhere. I'm nowhere. Right? Meaning I'm in a world which is a speck of dust, which is, as Hawking liked to say, and Hawking was brilliant in physics and idiotic often when he stepped out of physics, as often happens. And the fact that he was good at physics means nothing about claims about the rest of the world, about the nature of interiors, or what we might call the interior sciences, or philosophy, or metaphysics. Hawking was a classical British aristocrat of a certain kind who held certain kind of opinions about the world, which were just part of general British aristocracy and a kind of reductionist materialism. It had nothing to do with actually his physics. So Hawking says, right, it's the whole thing's just a made up, constructed speck of dust, meaningless. And of course he was rebelling against the religions, but what he basically asserted was the whole thing means nothing. And any meaning you make is made up. That's postmodernism. And who are you? No one. Who are you? You're no one. Where are you? No place. Right? Who are you? No one. What do you mean you're no one? Meaning you're a random, meaningless, ultimately therefore irrelevant. You can never do anything that's ultimately meaningful, because nothing is ultimately meaningful. And that's how we got to our friend Harari, that we often quote, but I'll give you a different quote this time. When he's asked at a particular TED Talk, what's the purpose of the human being in the world? He says, nothing. Nothing. The whole thing is just right. And the second quote that we do often, any meaning or value you ascribe to your life, mere delusion. It's all made up. So therefore, what ought you do? Well, if you live nowhere and you are no one, then what should you do? Nothing. There's nothing to do. It's irrelevant. It's meaningless. That's one half of the world. Does everyone get that? It's like, it's kind of hard to get. And we're going to talk about where we are in the world today, like literally in a couple of minutes, but I want to get the context, right? Then we have an alternative view in the world, and that's the classical fundamentalist view. And the fundamentalist view that dominates the Houthi world and dominates the Hezbollah world and dominates the Iranian world, with the Shiite world, the Hamas world is a Sunni world, it dominates Hamas, and it's an entire frame of not Islam, but I would call Islamic fundamentalism, extreme Islamic fundamentalism, which is very strong throughout much of the Islamic world. It's not the entire Islamic world. Islam produced an enormous amount of depth and beauty and gorgeousness and goodness, obviously. But what has taken a huge position at the very center of the Islamic world, which is extremely strong and has an enormous amount of sympathy throughout much of the Islamic world, although not even close to all of it. I would say the great majority of Islam is not there. But what's hijacked is this brand of Islamic terror fundamentalism, which has established itself as a death cult. But from what's important to us in this moment is something very simple. Very, very simple. Which is, its belief is, where am I? I'm in a world in which God created for Islam. And for a particular brand, says Khamenei, of Shiite Islam, by the way. And if you don't actually fulfill that brand of Islam, you are evil, you are an infidel, and you deserve to be killed. That's simply fact. If you haven't read actually the works of Khamenei, right, and his circle, which I have, you should. Or the works that kind of dominate Hezbollah. If you haven't, you should. I have, you should. Or the founding charter and the documents of Hamas. If you haven't, you should. And although they're not only Quranic, they're sources of the Quran, and then they mix in Algerian nationalism and kind of certain kinds of neo-Marxism, and there's a whole series of other influences. But at the very core, it's where are you? You're in a world in which God chose us, right, to live in a particular way. And if you don't, you're not part of us, and you don't live in this way, you can be brutally raped, maimed, and murdered, even though that would seem to be horrific by any other standard. But you got to get that. So therefore, who am I? I'm either Dar el Harb, I'm either of the sword, Dar el Harb, I'm either of the sword, those who should be killed by the sword, or I'm Dar el Islam. I'm of pure Islam. What ought I do? What ought I do? I ought to destroy Israel. I ought to destroy America. I ought to destroy Belgium. I ought to destroy the Netherlands. I ought to destroy Europe. I ought to destroy anything in the world which is not an expression of my vision of the truth. And I do it in the most brutal and cruel way. And I'm sure that I'm expressing value. So the response of Islamic fundamentalism is a response to a postmodern Western world that says all value is made up, all value is contrived, there is no value. Where are you? Nowhere. Who are you? No one. What should you do? Doesn't matter, nothing, or anything, but nothing ultimately matters. I want to get that. Nothing ultimately matters. Position one. Position two, where are you in a world that God created only for the chosen one? Who are you? You're an agent of the prophet to kill the infidel and to bring in Sharia law in the best sense that it can be brought in, even if it requires violence and maiming and murder and rape. And what ought be done? You ought fulfill Sharia law. You ought actually fulfill, in this Islamic fundamentalist terror expression, you ought fulfill the massacre of October 7th, which, for example, Zoran Mamdani, mayor of New York, his wife, on the very next day, before Israel went into Gaza, had nothing to do with Israel going into Gaza. Whatever you think of what Israel did or didn't do in Gaza, which I think is a tragic, horrific story, Gaza. Horrific, horrific, horrific. And the blood of every child that died as a result of that war rips my heart out, like the blood of every German child that was innocent that died in the Allied bombings in World War II rips my heart out. But let's just understand, just to be clear, Zohran Mamdani's wife, the mayor of New York, on the very next day, right, said, oh, wow, these terrible massacres, these brutalities that occurred, she was good. Very next day, all over the world, right, all over the world, we knew in 2-3 days, we knew the horror of what happened. There was huge surging all through the streets of how wonderful that was. I'm not willing to turn away from that. Okay? I'm not willing to turn away from that. Well, let's just kind of get this. So what happened? The worldview I just described, and then we're going to talk today about desire. Desire is our topic today. But we're going to talk about desire as a way of honoring. So you think what I was just talking about was theoretical. It was abstract. It was some hard-line position, and you're feeling very liberal, and why is he even talking about that? So let's just take a look now about how what I just described played out in the world. And we've looked at it every week for the last 2 weeks. We're just going to spend 2-3 minutes. But we're actually going to take some time and to look at it carefully. Just look at it carefully. What actually happened? What actually happened in the last January 8th, January 9th? What actually happened? How's this played out in the world? So take us inside, Krista.
2 months ago, the state took their children's lives. 40 days later, they carried their grief with their heads held high, unbroken. They spoke their children's names. They refused the killer's mourning rituals. They sang, they danced, they celebrated life. Listen closely. They turn grief into song. And remembrance into defiance. Listen to them. Their voices carry what the state tries to bury.
شاید جسم بچه من رو کشته باشه ولی آرزوهاشو، هدفاشو، راهشو، مسیرشو نمیتونی بکشی. لباسی که تو این عکس تن مهراد تن منه، این برای تو یه پیام داره. شاید جسم تو یه این لباس رو برده باشی ولی نمیتونی کاری کنی که راهش ادامه پیدا نکنه.
Now, a bomb has taken the life of the leader who ordered their children's deaths.
Let's see what actually happened. Just read slowly. Keep going. Next.
آسمون رو ببین یه آهنگ بود میگفت که بابا وقت خدافظیه ولی به مامان چیزی نگو بابا دیگه نمیکشم از در پر بغض گلوم بابا اگه رفتم بدون همه اینا واسه آینده بود بدون همه یه آرزوم اینه ببینم ایران و آزادی روز آسمون رو
خدا لاله دمیده از ماتم سر به قدشان سر و
این پایان کسی نیست. اونا به شکل خاطره و تأثیراتشون در ما ادامه دارن. پس این یادبودی است برای بخشی از خود ما که تا دیروز کالبدی جدا از ما داشت. ما جمع میشیم و یاد اونا رو اگر نه در واقع در ذهن زنده میکنیم.
ظلمت میکشه رو صورت خورشید لقا پلکاتو روی هم بذار دنیای من آروم بخواب فردا اگه مال تو بود خورشیدکم آزاد بتاب شب میگذره غمگین نباش دنیای من آروم بخواب لیلی لیلی لیلی
You know, there's moments when, and we did this when Ukraine erupted, and, you know, I did with my friend Aubrey Marcus, like a huge podcast on Israel and Gaza when it began. And as I said, I will do another series at some point on Israel and Gaza. But that's an entirely, there's something completely different happening. Ukraine is a horror. Iran is a horror. I want you to get, we're not talking about the horror of innocent German children dying in a aerial bombardment in World War II in which hundreds of thousands of German women and children who were ostensibly innocent, they weren't part of Hitler directly, and it's just a horror. Every child killed in Gaza is a horror. Any innocent child killed is a horror. War is a horror. But that's a different conversation. If you can't make that distinction, it's a different conversation. We're talking here about not the Allies defending themselves and taking Hitler down and the horrific nature of war in which innocents are destroyed. We're talking about the intentional movement to simply dismember and kill people in order to retain power, in which on January 7th and 8th, 9th, probably 40 to 50,000 people were killed. And we're talking about just this kind of, this insane horror. This insane horror in which this regime that makes its position, this fundamentalist regime, but it's part of fundamentalism world over in its destroyed forms, which makes desire itself the violation. Any sense of kind of aliveness and desire in the robust nature of the living self as an athlete. So they just killed this 19-year-old boy a week and a half ago, this beautiful boy, and two of his friends. So they're killing athletes. Any athlete that they can kill who's shown even the least bit of, aligning with the protests. They're killing dancers. They're killing artists. They're killing writers. They're killing the thread of desire itself. And what they're doing is they're actually acting against desire, saying that actually all desire needs to be actually only desire for the fulfillment of the will of Allah. Desire needs to be purified. But of course, the actual result in practice is the worst form of rape and sexual abuse and sexual violation and brutal sadistic violence that you can imagine. That's actually what's happening. And it's happening now. It's happening right now, right? Today, tomorrow, people are being executed People are being raped. People are being abused. It's happening right now. Right now.
I hope you're enjoying this deep study with Dr. Marc Gafni. If you would like to get more involved, there are 3 ways to deepen your study. Number 1, understand that every single Sunday, Dr. Marc Gafni does a free live stream teaching. If you hit the link in the description below this video, you can get email notifications every time we go live. Second, if you would like to really deepen your study of these concepts and also get to study with Dr. Marc Gafni, then we have an online school that you can join. On that online platform, we have 10 self-study courses that you can take at your own pace. And we also do quarterly 3-week live courses with Dr. Marc Gafni, and we do workshops and other great things which you can get by becoming a student of our online school. Hit the link in the description to become a student. It also supports all the work that we're doing here, so please invest in that. Number 3, if you really want to take the full deep dive and get to experience what it's like to sit with a master teacher like Dr. Marc Gafni in person, then we have one event every year where you should be. It is a 5-day long in-person retreat taking place from April 20th to April 24th in Holland, Europe, 2026. It is just 1 month away and we only have a few seats left. So if you would like the opportunity to sit face to face with a master teacher like Dr. Marc Gafni, then this is the time to join. There's also a whole staff of other amazing people who will be there, and you'll get to meet the entire community of people who are studying alongside. It is the most fun deep dive 5-day experience where we're talking about these types of questions that apply to the entire situation on the world today and how we can respond to the root causes. So you should go check out all 3 of these links in the description below, and we hope to see you in every single one. Without further ado, enjoy the rest of this teaching with Dr. Marc Gafni.
And so what I wanted to do today was to give a short talk on the dignity of desire. Now stay with me for a second, friends. So you have on the one side this kind of horror of Iran, the horror of Hamas. The horror of Hamas, which violated the feminine women in a way that they haven't been violated since the worst parts of World War II. Hamas, Iran, Houthis, Hezbollah. This kind of excess of anti-value that is being supported, and I just want you to stay with me really clearly, that's being supported by huge swaths of the neoliberal world around the world, right? Huge protests around the world, right? Supporting Hamas, supporting their Iranian patrons, the Houthis, Hezbollah, across Manhattan, London, Sydney, Australia, Germany, Holland, Belgium. Because in the West, desire itself is an accident. So in the theological distortion of Islamic fundamentalism, desire and that aliveness that goes with the embodied human desire for life in its multitudinous forms, which is free and alive and delighted, is evil. So there's this destruction in the name of Allah, Allah Akbar, Allah is great, to destroy it. And there are versions of that fundamentalism in other religions around the world, which when they took power, acted in similar ways. That's the fundamentalist world that says we own value. Value is you are the infidel, I am chosen, and I destroy you for God, and I destroy your desire. Look at the faces of the kids we just saw that were killed. Look at the aliveness. Look at the desire in their faces. Look at the goodness in their faces. Look at the light on their faces. If you have a picture, just you have a picture for a second of the 19-year-old boy who was just executed a week and a half ago. Then on the other side of it, you have this Western neoliberal notion that moves throughout Europe, throughout the United States, throughout Australia, throughout the entire kind of neoliberal world over, stay close, which says that desire is meaningless, with two implications. One is we will use the web to shape people's desire in order to control them. That's Alex Pentland, MIT Media Lab. But two is that it doesn't matter what you desire. Desire what you want. Whatever you desire is what you desire. Try not to destroy people because it'll be harder for you to get what you desire in a world that you've destroyed. But there's nothing particular that you should be desiring. Desire is not desire for value. Desire is this strange evolutionary survival instinct, but survival is a complete accident of a meaningless cosmos, which is pointless. So desire means nothing. So that world becomes not a world of eros, becomes a pornographic universe in which we don't know how to clarify desire. We don't know how to access desire. We don't experience the dignity of desire. We don't experience the divinity of desire. We don't experience the goodness of desire. Does that make sense, everyone? Desire is a complete random accident, which means nothing. Those are the poles that exist in the world today. And if you notice today, my friends, tenderly, I'm being more, if I can use the word, stark, S-T-A-R-K, stark, than we usually are. It's stark. You just got to see it clearly. You got to see the stark contrast. The stark contrast between the answer to who, where, and what. The Western answer, who am I? No one. Where am I? No place. What needs to be done? Either anything or nothing. It doesn't matter. The Islamic fundamentalist, right? Because that's the war that's going on right now. The extreme Islamic fundamentalist response. Where am I? In a world where Allah says that we are the only chosen ones. Who am I? I am the chosen one. What ought I do? I ought to kill the infidel in as much cruelty as is necessary in order to have the entire world exist under Sharia law. That's just true. That is the stark contrast. Two views of desire. Stark contrast. I want to just get it. And yes, there's complexity on both sides, but the stark contrast holds. It's actually true. Okay? The stark contrast holds. Okay? The stark contrast is desire, evil should be stamped out. Only desire should be pure worship of God and God's will, as interpreted by Sharia law. And what's the main point? That experience, that extinguishing of desires, literally every second, as we're talking now, is ripping people apart, literally, physically. And I don't want to turn away from it. And then the alternative view of desire, the desire that reigns in the neoliberal West is that desire is an accident. It's some sort of survival drive, but survival itself is an accident. So in order to build a new world, we actually need a new story of desire. Okay? In other words, in order to build a new world, we actually have to realize that these two visions are bankrupt. Obviously, we have to liberate everyone who can be liberated. Obviously, that needs to happen. Obviously, we need to stand with the incredibly heroic and brave protesters in Iran. Obviously. And the deeper move we need to make is to articulate a new story of desire, where we actually have a direct experience of the dignity of desire. We actually experience desire as a first principle and first value of cosmos. It's hard to say without crying. Desire is a first principle and first value of cosmos. Desire is not accidental. not random, not meaningless. And desire is certainly not fundamentalist, to be opposed by a kind of fundamentalism as a kind of rank evil. It's neither of those. Desire is the primary first principle and first value of cosmos itself. That's what desire is. Now, stay with me, my friend, right? It says correct, like, where are we going here, man? Have you noticed, my friend, my brother? No one's bothered to say this anyplace? That actually, what's at root here? There's this actual civilizational conflict. And at the root of the civilizational conflict is distinct answers to where, who, and what. Now here's the thing. Even in the midst of the horror of Islamic fundamentalism in its radical and evil form, not in the beautiful form of Islam, even there's a root which is saying something that's real. Otherwise, it would have no fuel. Otherwise, it would have no energy. Otherwise, there'd be nothing that could support it or sustain it. And the root is a refusal to accept the Western position that desire is made up, that it's meaningless, that it's neutral, that it's utterly random, that it is without any gravitas at all. That's correct. Desire does have gravitas. It's like, oh. And of course, at the root of the Western position is a correct intention, as Voltaire wrote at the beginning of the Western Enlightenment, remember the cruelties. And when Voltaire wrote, remember the cruelties, he's talking about what we just saw today, because what we saw today has existed as an expression of various religious fundamentalisms throughout history. So Voltaire said, remember the cruelties. Let's just understand desire as a random phenomenon of cosmos and not destroy it, and also not give it more than its due. It's utterly naturalistic, has no ultimate meaning. We'll create meaning for it ourselves as human beings, and that will be our human dignity, a kind of secular humanism. But that doesn't work either, because we actually sense inside of ourselves that value is real and that our lives do matter. And we sense that our lives matter, that our choices matter, that there's dignity to being alive, that there's a sacred quality to being alive, that how we embrace each other and the quality of our kindness and the quality of our goodness is not a mere human construct. It's not merely something that we make up in order to avoid the pain of a tale told by an idiot, full of sounds and fury signifying nothing. No, kindness participates in the kindness of cosmos. And goodness participates in the field of goodness. And beauty participates in the field of beauty. And truth participates in the field of truth. And desire, which is at the root of all of it, participates in the field of desire. Desire is, I want to just get what a big deal that is to say. Desire is a first principle and first value of cosmos. And even though the protesters in Iran don't have a language for it, they can't quite articulate it, they sense and know that it's true. They sense that actually they need to stand for desire. They need to stand for eros. They need to stand for aliveness. They don't quite have a language for it. That's not their job now. They're being heroes, right? We need to languish it for them and for us and for reality at this moment of meta-crisis, because the crisis at its core is a crisis of desire. And it's a crisis of intimacy, which itself is a crisis of desire. It's a crisis of imagination, which is we don't know how to imagine what we should desire. The most fundamental experience of the human being is I want. I desire. All the way up and all the way down the evolutionary chain. I have two sets of books here. These are about 1,000 pages of articles by a woman named Catherine Kaufman, who's a very, very good writer. She writes in kind of biology and kind of evolutionary science. Her husband is Stuart Kaufman, who's a very, very important evolutionary biologist, complexity theory, right, a super important thinker, and they're both doing good work. And Catherine writes, not just in one place, but in multiple articles. She has this thread that runs through her writing, which she talks about quantum hedonism. It's a beautiful phrase, isn't it? I wanted to credit her with the phrase quantum hedonism. But she doesn't talk about it in one place. It's a thread that runs in about probably 10 major articles. Yes, she's not a major writer. She's written about maybe 10 major articles in different forms and different idioms. She's writing across a spectrum of idioms in different kinds of quills dipped into different kinds of ink. So she's writing to a number of different kinds of audiences. But quantum hedonism means that reality is driven by desire. And at its core, I'm now adding that desire is always desire for value. It's always desire for value. It's always desire for the good, the true, and the beautiful. That's what desire is. Desire is the quality in cosmos, which when we clarify it, discloses beauty, discloses truth, discloses goodness, discloses depth, discloses the radical amazement of that which is wondrous, of that which is awe-inspiring, of that which rips our hearts open and makes us weep with joy. That's desire. Desire is the dignity of cosmos, and the dignity of cosmos itself is rooted in the divinity of cosmos. God is desire. David's going to put up in a second the 4-letter name of God. But in the lineage of Solomon, which shaped the Renaissance, there was a realization that at its very core, reality is desire. That's what reality is. So where am I? I live in where am I? Let's go to where and who and what. Where am I? I live in a CosmoErotic universe. I live in a CosmoErotic universe. I live in an amorous cosmos. I live in an intimate universe. Does everyone hear that? We have to change the root story, but not as a declaration, but based on the best science, interior and exterior. We have to change the root story, and we have to teach it and live it and embody it in ourselves and teach it to our children and to our children's children world over in a shared story of value as a context for our diversity. And at the very center of that shared story of value is a realization that desire is good, and that desire is true, and that desire is beautiful. And let these words ring throughout the land. Let the freedom for the depth of clarified desire ring throughout the land. And let every martyr in Iran that died yesterday and the day before and a month ago and a month before, 50,000 people in 2 nights directly slaughtered. And the slaughter goes on literally today. We stand and we honor you and we feel you. And those of you who I know well, who I'm texting late at night, know that last night again, till half the night. I've got to watch this. I've got to watch it. I've got to see the faces. They deserve the dignity of me turning towards them and stepping out of the normal flow of my life and feeling them. They're dying for the dignity of desire. They are heroes for the divinity of desire. So where are we? Let's speak it for them. Let's speak it for them. We're here to honor, right? To honor, right? Let's speak it for them. Where do we live? We live in a cosmoerotic universe. CosmoErotic universe, an intimate universe, an amorous cosmos is a universe animated by desire. Let's take a look. It's called the 4-letter name of God. Okay, the 4-letter name of God. So the 4-letter name of God, which is, it reads from right to left, Yud, He, Vav, He. So what is Yud, He, Vav, He? So Yud, He, Vav, He, the Yud, which is the first letter, the Yud enters the He. So remember Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah? Hallelujah. Hallelujah. So Yah, Hallelujah, Yah. So breathe in with me, breathe in. Everyone breathe in with me. Yah. Breathe in. Let's breathe in together, my friends. Yah. Yah is the name of God. The Yud enters the He. The breath of life. The inhale and the exhale. The penetration of the line of the Yud into the He. The receptive line penetrates the hey, which opens itself. And you see that the hey, the second letter, receives. It's a vessel. It's a container to receive. Yud hey. Then the third letter is a vav, V-A-V at the bottom. So the vav, as you can see, is a yud pulled down. So the vav is the full expression of the phallic thrust in every dimension of reality. In study and exchange and love and kindness, in friendship and creativity and eros in all of its forms. So now the second two letters are the vav enters the hey. Right? The second set of letters. The first two letters are the yud enters the hey. The second two letters, the vav enters the hey. So the name of God is eros. God is desire. And in the lineage of Solomon, the first two letters are called Trei Reyin Dalomit Parshin. Two beloveds whose mad desire never abates. They never separate from each other. They're always locked in each other. They're always inter-included. They're always receiving and penetrating and penetrating and receiving. And the hey rides the yud and the yud penetrates the hey. And the physical exterior expression of that in the manifest world is quantum hedonism. It's electromagnetism. It's the gravitational. It's the strong and weak nuclear. It's the four forces of reality as we know them classically that are animated by love desire, that are animated by eros value, that are animated by the divinity of desire, which is the dignity of cosmos. Cosmos is moved by allurement. Reality is allurement. What's underneath gravity? Nothing. Allurement. Gravity is allurement. There's nothing underneath gravity. We've just named it. But actually, the four forces are structures of allurement. I'm drawn towards, but not absorption, allurement and autonomy. My own independent dignity, which is now moving towards you. Your independent dignity, which is spreading its heart open and receiving me. The yud enters the hey. That's called constant allurement. Constant eros. Constant desire. And then the second two letters are Trei Reyin Demit Parshin, two beloveds who separate from each other and then come back together. So that's desire as it plays in the human chapter of the evolutionary story, where we are invited to, demanded by cosmos to not just instinctually experience desire, which is wired by the living cosmos of meaning and value into us, but we actually, as we awaken into the depth of our humanity, which is our divinity, we actually can choose our will. What does free will mean? We say free will. Free will is a word that avoids desire. Will means desire. That's what will means. Will is not cognition, it's carnal. Will is not cognitive, it's carnal. Will, right, is the word ratzon, R-A-T-Z-O-N, ratzon in Hebrew, ratzon. Ratzon means ratz. It's when I run towards you in desire. It's a two-letter root, and it describes when I run towards you in desire. Ratz, I run towards you in desire. So ratzon is will, it's my desire towards you. It's the desire moving through me. So the second two letters, the vav hey, that were just there and disappeared, but that's okay. The last two letters, the vav hey, are the two beloveds that separate and then choose. They clarify their desire. And then the clarification of desire is when I actually become ontically identified with the divine field of desire, and I become an irreducibly unique expression of that desire. And that desire at its core, Maxwell, my friend, is a desire for value itself. So now let's go back. So where am I? I live in a field of desire. Does everyone get that? Wow. Do you get that answer? I live in a CosmoErotic universe, and Eros is the experience of radical aliveness, desiring ever deeper contact and ever greater wholeness, which yields in its wake ever greater value. We are giving this as a eulogy. This is a eulogy. We're doing a eulogy for every single martyr, for every 3-year-old and 5-year-old and 10-year-old and 15-year-old and 17-year-old and 25-year-old and 35-year-old. And I mean, I mean, the medics, the doctors who refused to stand away even though they knew they were going to be shot. The women who went to the street and said, we'll give up our lives for a free Iran. But by a free Iran, they meant so that we can re-enter the dignity and divinity of the field of desire and to clarify our desire as unique expressions of the field of desire, because that is the freedom of our dignity. And for that we're born. And that is the essential joy of cosmos, which makes cosmos a place that is worthy to be in. Wow. So where do we live? We live in a field of desire. We live in a CosmoErotic universe. And what is the fundamental desire of that field? For more intimacy, for more shared identity, for ever greater depths of mutuality, recognition, union, and embrace, for ever more kindness, for ever more goodness, for ever more delight, for ever more fierce aliveness, which embraces and we feel each other. And we honor each other. We pour into each other. We laugh. We cry. We break bread together. We create together. We participate in the evolution of love, which is the evolution of God. Each one of us. So where am I? I live in a field of desire, in a CosmoErotic universe. Who am I? Who am I? I'm an irreducibly unique configuration of desire. That's who I am. Who am I? I'm an irreducibly unique configuration of desire, and I am recognized by all that is, and I am chosen by all that is. And I am intended by the desire of all that is. I am desired by all that is. I am needed by all that is. I am adored by all that is. That's who I am. I'm an irreducible, unique configuration of desire. That's who I am. And the third question, what ought I do? What ought I do? What ought I do? What should I do? What should I do? I ought clarify my desire. Beirur, which is what Luria calls it in the 16th century, Beirur, to clarify my desire so that a unique vector of divine desire that lives only in me, as me, and through me, which is a desire for value, for ever more wholeness, for ever more value, ever more kindness, ever more laughter, ever more goodness, ever more tears that cleanse, ever more transformation, ever more clarity, ever more insight, ever more poetry, ever more song, ever more melody, ever more dance. That actually that unique desire that moves in me, as me, and through me for unique value, for the story that only I can tell and live, for the dance that only I can dance, for the song that only I can sing, for the prose and poetry that only I can pen. That ought be done. That's not an ought. That desire, fulfilling that desire, clarifying and fulfilling and gifting the fulfillment of that desire to the world, that's the purpose of my life. Wow. Maxwell, does it make more sense now, my friend? That's where we're going. Everybody like, hello. Hello. Yes. Yes. So we're in this stark moment where we've got these two, and I wanted to paint them, and I know I painted them starkly. I wanted to paint them starkly. It's stark. It's a stark, these two different visions of where, who, and what. Where, who, and what. The kind of fundamentalist, cruel version, the Western neoliberal empty version. At their core, I know there's lots of complexity there, but at their core, they're both corrupt. They're both decadent at their core. They're not equal. I'm not making a moral equivalence between them, but they're both at their core, they're empty. They've lost their cadence. The children of Iran, the young men and women demonstrating in the street, they're almost, you can feel in them the original impulse towards freedom that created the French Revolution, that created the American Revolution, that lived in John Adams, that lived in Rousseau when he talks about the general will, the desire of the people. You can feel that they don't quite have the words, they don't quite have the language, but they know this is true. They know desire is sacred. They're willing to die for the dignity of desire. Does everyone get that? They're willing to give up their lives even though they can't quite articulate it. They know it. They know it in their bodies. It lives in them. In their bodies, they vision God. They vision and experience in the very fabric and cellular structure of their being the dignity and divinity of desire, the desire for the good, the true, and the beautiful, the desire for free will. What's free will? We said will is desire. Free will actually means free desire. Freedom to clarify my desire, which is freedom to be God, because God is desire. God is desire. And anti-God, anti-value is this anti-desire position that demonizes desire. Desire is not demonic. Desire is daemonic. D-A-E-M-O-N-I-C, daemonic. It's the daemon that guides me home. Desire is always desire for value at its very core. And when value is not realized, then desire gets degraded. Desire gets corrupted. Desire gets tragically misdirected. But at its root, whenever we're on our knees, we're always on our knees to God, to value, to valor. So today is a eulogy and a prayer. A eulogy, a memorial, a memory, but a memory not as a memory traced in the brain for that which has passed and is gone. Desire doesn't die. Right? When there's a living desire, that desire participates in eternity. And when I want to take this the next step next week, we're going to go part 2 of desire. And I'm going to try and ask everyone who comes next week to have already listened to this week. We're going to go the next step. How do I actually practice in desire? How do I actually become homo amor? How do I become a desire-infused human being in which desire and allurement, clarified desire, clarified allurement, right, guide my life? Krista.
Thank you, Dr. Marc Gafni, and thank us all. We have literally just articulated a response to this horror and this suffering and this outrageous pain, which is this new story of desire. And I can't wait for next week to feel that even deeper in our bodies and make that real in the practice of our daily lives. So thank you. That was so powerful. So now I want to ask us the question, what can we actually do with this in our lives? How can we show up for this? How can we say yes to this? How can we actually stand on the side of love? And we all know the way that we can support this revolution here, the way that we can support bringing this new story of desire into the world is by supporting the revolution. So we want each and every one of us to be a member of this community, and you can already join for only $25 a month, and that is a support level that is accessible for everyone. But at that level you actually get access to the community, you can meet other members, you can connect with each other, you get access to the daily prayer. We're praying every day, chanting together every day to access this field of desire together. You get access to beautiful self-study courses, and also the Unique Self workshop that David and Claire are doing this Saturday. So the link is in the chat box. Please do sign up and let's make this revolution real together.